Hello, and welcome to Guys Deals with Feelings, a podcast focused on men's health, emotional awareness, identity, responsibility, and presence. Jason and I share grounded conversations and practical insights to help men navigate modern life with clarity and intention. If this podcast hits home with you, please like, share, and subscribe. A quick 5-star review helps us reach more men who could be helped by hearing this material. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, and Apple Podcast under Guys Deals with Feelings. So, what's going on, Jay?
Hey, man. Morning.
So today we're
Howdy.
going to be dealing with boundaries, and it's
Dun, dun, dun.
to me, yeah, exactly. Duh, duh, duh. And this is something that hits home with me. I come from like a generational habitual boundary stepping culture. So for generations, my
Lack of
family's been,
boundaries. Yeah.
has not had boundaries, don't understand them. And I don't know if that's cultural why, maybe we can get into that. But so most men don't struggle with boundaries because they don't care. They struggle with boundaries because they're afraid of what the boundaries might cost them. For example, connection, approval, and or belonging. So instead of setting boundaries, we tolerate things longer than we should. We over explain, we overgive, we absorb stress, resentment, and emotional weight that isn't ours. And then one day we don't feel connected at all. We feel isolated. So today we're going to talk about how to set healthy boundaries without pushing people away, and how boundaries, when done correctly, actually protect connection instead of destroying it. And so, the idea of boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They determine what we allow in, what we take responsibility for, what we carry emotionally. And then isolation happens when boundaries are either too weak or too rigid. So the goal is to be flexible, clear boundaries that protect your peace and preserve relationships. And, I was, I don't know that it was exactly during this transformation after Joel, but it was definitely in the area. And because I was raised and now that I'm so aware of boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries, et cetera. And one big one I'll share because I think it's interesting coming from my perspective. After losing Joel in the accident and um, having to understand that other people have boundaries about what they do and don't want to hear. And not because they're fill in negative adjective here, as far as bad or mean or weak or blah, blah, blah.
Uncaring.
Yeah, this is too heavy. I'd say how my son died in an accident, how it happened, or I just say they died. Sharing any of this can be impactful on one's
Yeah.
being, their
It's the
energy.
it's the most unimaginable thing that most people can imagine, right?
Right, and then it was a fucked up scenario that, anybody could find themselves in. It comes with a lot of judgment, from the outside looking in, but please know it's any of us could have done it, and it's really heavy. So I had to learn the boundary of trauma sharing, and, that I my trauma wasn't a weapon to be used. It wasn't a tool to describe it. It was just an event in the set of events that have led up to today. And, that took a long time because it defined me for years, right? 7 or 8 years. It defined who I was. I am this big of a mess because, and then my son's dead. And, others around me, including family, began to notice. And now when you're around me, it's not probably even in the first conversation we have, unless it's pertinent to, say I'm talking about this show or something, and why do I do a show on trauma? So, uh, and then I'm still very careful to not navigate into any details. Very rarely do I share details other than that he's passed. Uh, but anyway, so there's an example of a really difficult one to navigate as a father, as somebody who's gone through some serious trauma. That's a difficult one, and then an easy one. There's easy ones like just respecting a person's decision making. So, um, even our children, so we have grown children and they have an opinion or a thought, they can have that. They're as entitled to it as we are. And a healthy boundary is to acknowledge that. And if they share something, if you cheer for one side of a political spectrum and they cheer for the other, you just got to respect that. And as a dad, I think you gotta kinda own it. You know, if you raise somebody to think a certain way and they think that way, that's you, and if you've changed, so anyway, these are boundaries, and they're not like, and the rigid piece that I talked about, you know, we will not talk about children dying. Like, it's not that ain't how it works. You just navigate it. It's a process like the rest of the stuff we discuss. And, maybe you can jump in for us on why are boundaries so hard to navigate? Maybe you might even have some history to go with it.
Yeah.
Why in the hell? I don't know if your parents are that way. My mom didn't understand a boundary, and I don't think her parents. I know her parents didn't understand boundaries, especially her mother, and they're both great women. But and it's not a woman thing. I don't. My grandfather didn't understand them either. So, what is that? What is that? Why do we have such a hard time with it? Why does it seem like this obscure
Yeah,
nasty
yeah,
thing?
yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's all in our language. The first way, or the way I approach it is to dissect it, right? So we say, I'm going to set a boundary. What does that mean? Around what, right? Like,
Mhm.
what are we referring to when we are using this conceptual word? I'm going to set a boundary. Well, so what comes to mind, right? A, a, about around what? What am I drawing a circle around? Like what comes to mind?
Oh, for me, if you're asking it, so if I think, when asked that question today, it's around it's safety, it's security, it's comfort, um, and
So
both
you're
ways.
describing feelings, right?
You know,
Right. So the easy way to, I think, answer the first question is why do we struggle with it so much? Is because we don't really dissect it. Uh, uh, so I mean, let's just think about what are some of the components of what we're talking about when we say boundaries, right? I'm communicating something, right? What do we think of? Like a no.
so yeah,
I'm communicating a no. That may be
mhm. A
right.
lot of times it is a no, right?
Yeah. 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 So there's an expression piece. I'm expressing. I'm generally saying I'm expressing, maybe you could call it a need, or in this moment, I'm reflecting on it and investigating it with you, right? Like a while ago, you said, my son's an adult. I have to have boundaries and respect his life. That's great. But why does that mean you can't express yourself and
And
communicate? Right
and
now, if it gets to a point where if you express yourself and he's not, let's say he doesn't fully try on what you're suggesting, and now you're angry and upset and you don't talk to him, right? Like,
Well, that not even that far. So, especially in the father-child relationship, I think I have to navigate that carefully because my words are, when I'm talking to you, it's not that I'm not authentic. It's just that I can speak freely with words not having too much weight. So I say a word and it weighs 5 pounds. When you say a word with a child, it may weigh 5 pounds, and your intention may be that it weighs 5 pounds. But when the child receives it, it weighs 10,000 pounds because of the person who said it. And it's all that, there's a bunch that goes with that. I'm not trying to unpack that at all, other than to say, I have to navigate responses to my children in all things, but I think that's part of my boundary that I've created, and it's boundaries, I believe, are two-way streets, that I am protecting others when I don't share my trauma or when I don't tell my son, "I disagree with you." I'm protecting them from the heaviness of my words, and not to, uh, in a moment that I don't wanna, if I was to engage into a debate or wanted to debate or he said it because he wanted to debate it, total different conversation. But if he's just doing something, this is old and it's going to sound stupid, but I bought a Tesla because of the environment. All right. That's fine. that's hey, that is fine. The car is purchased, whatever. We I don't have to say I agree or disagree, and I'm not getting into any of this, what I do and don't feel about the environment. And I try to steer clear from all this stuff. But to get to the example, I think that, okay, great. You got Tesla. Cool. It's not for me to say, well, that's fucking stupid, or why would somebody buy a car based on some political stuff, or, it's just, he gets to make decisions as a 22-year-old adult. Now, if he is making a decision that I think is going to be detrimental to his health, I say, well, I think that's going to be detrimental to your health. I'm not just going to say, well, he's 22, I just will let him say it. And that's the obscurity of these boundaries that I reference, and we must navigate them with intention, because I believe that they are important. It is important that I don't, if somebody cuts,
Yeah.
I don't know, if
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get in
yeah.
front of me at the store, I don't say
I'm I'm sorta
aggravatingly.
catching on to what you're so, I think the bottom line for this is really about how do we express ourselves, and what are we expressing, right? So if your son comes to you and is describing, uh, potentially making a decision, right, that, maybe, I don't know, being 48, 49 years old, you might have been faced with similar choices or decisions, so you have some experience to share, right? So, so he comes to you and he's describing something he's about to do or whatever. What is it in a moment like that that we would want to communicate to our child? And so for me, it boils down to wanting to communicate, hey, I love you. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. I wanna literally just put you in my pocket and control everything you do. But I'm expressing my own feelings. I'm not expressing, "I know what's right." That's the trap. I don't know what's
Mm,
right. I know what my experience has been, and I can communicate that, and I can communicate my feelings. I can say, "I love you." It just scares me. It seems like a not the greatest decision. I can communicate that. So, eh, when I hear the word boundaries, um, it obviously brings up my 40-year lack of awareness around any of this. And then it just brings up uh, self expression and expressing my needs in any given moment, right? Not my opinions. Um, but I would say the first step in being able to increase our awareness around what a boundary is, what what we're actually communicating is we have to know what we're feeling. You see what I mean?
mhm.
And I have to be yeah, aware of what I'm feeling, responsible for what I'm feeling, and then I have to hopefully I have language that's really related to communicating my interiority, what I'm feeling, right? Uh, I don't know, I feel like I could sort of ramble there for a second. I'm kinda curious how
Well
that's
so that navigates perfectly into the part that protects us, and that is how it's so hard to say no. And when a boundaries, we were taught to just deal with things, not make it a thing, stay quiet. We but as you know, when we avoid these boundaries, they're not just gonna disappear. Things that are rattling us aren't gonna go away, and then resentment's gonna kick in. And so we're on, and then the internal stuff starts to boil, which, to your point, a lot of that is inability to navigate emotion with internal. Like,
Mm.
we don't know what we're doing internally. We've been harping on every episode, because of how we've been conditioned. Dealing with the way we feel is something we don't do, and we must do. So hopefully,
Yeah,
you heard a previous episode, and you know that we're dealing with feelings, and so this expression of how we feel starts with knowing how we feel.
knowing how we
You
feel.
can't just be
Yeah,
like, "I'm angry. I
yeah,
wanna tell you I am angry."
yeah.
So I
Draw a
think
circle, like, if you draw a circle around yourself, I didn't mean to,
that's
sometimes
right.
I have, like, ADHD of the of the mouth. I'm a pretty animated character. You draw a circle around yourself, right? Let's just call that the boundary. And then the question becomes, why am I drawing it? Right? Now, the it's I guess you could say something outside of that circle it seems to be causing me problems, right? All right. So, yeah, because of our conditioning and the way our body's operating for most of us, right? Um, there are a lot of things outside of that circle that cause agitation, right? Whether it's family or I don't there are an infinite amount of things outside of that circle that trigger, right? Um, and yeah, that's because we have been conditioned to place all our attention outside of the circle. So we don't even, or often, I'm not trying to make real overarching generalities, but um, we don't generally ask why what's going on in the circle has been agitated, right? And we don't culturally, we're not taught the tools of how to really investigate that. We're taught to sort of rearrange the furniture to then make what's going on inside the circle feel better, right? So I set a boundary. I create space, right? Which is fine. But again, my question, well, eventually, it was a question that started to arise in me. Like, well, hold on, is this agitating me so much? But now it's the first thing I suggest to people when I'm working with them. People come in, they're talking about agitation in relationships and such, and then my first question is, "Well, why do you think it bothers you so much? Why do you care? Why do you have an opinion? Where does your opinion come from?" Right? I start asking questions like that so we can start to investigate, right? And so we can start asking, okay, yeah, boundaries a no, but why are we are we needing to express that? Because we're not okay. Why are we not okay?
Mhm. So what about in a scenario, let's walk through
Sure.
like a holiday scenario where and maybe it's an uncontrollable and it's an in-law scenario, and the whatever, we've all heard of the or I don't have this problem, but, a parent comes in and they just take your house over. That is something, the rigid way I think my parents aren't ever coming to my house again. I think that's a rigid boundary, and
Hmm.
we don't wanna do that. To understand what you're saying, why is it when my dad comes over that he overtakes my house bother me? Like, why do you give a shit he takes over your house? And it's my house. I've got and and I see the point, be loose, flow with it, and let the but how do we navigate that? Is that really me, or should I set the hard boundary in a scenario like that? I mean, or, and that even goes to a friend ask you to move, and you're like, "I don't wanna help you fucking move." Not because I don't like you.
Yeah.
I don't wanna help you move, dude. It's just something I don't wanna do.
Yeah. Right.
It's not that I don't care.
Mm.
Uh, I do
Yeah,
care.
I got you. Let's take the family situation,
Yeah, that's more yeah.
right? Um, and it's such a deep question. And I think the most important thing that is to, again, ask the question, why does it bother me? Why do I perceive they're doing that? Right? How do I interpret that? Okay. Now, generally, if I've been engaged in my own healing process, right, one of the things that emerges out of that is an increased level of compassion, an increased level of relating to everybody's struggle, even our parents, right? So So if I've been engaged in my own healing process, I might see what they're doing just as kind of what humans do, right? It's just kind of what we do, in general. And then I might be able to communicate a boundary to them, like, "Hey, Jeff, just chill out, like, relax," But I'm not taking it personal, right? So you can kind of imagine how that communication might go, how it might sound, and how it might feel, right? Now, if I generally haven't generally engaged in my healing process, when they come and whatever it means by taking over, I don't e we
You
sort
know
of
how
have
it
to
is. They
I
start.
do, I do, I do, I do, I do. But what I guess you could describe what the way that it's bothering us is it's, sort of take it personally, right? Now here's the reason in general that it bothers us so much and that we take it personally is because we've spent decades not knowing how to express ourselves, and we think it's their fault. It's still how we relate to our inability to express ourselves and to say no, right? And our inability to just communicate and share what we want and where we are is generally related to, right, like fear. I'm going to lose something, lose a relationship, or it's fear of the other person's response or their reaction, right? And so again, that's feeling. I'm afraid of feelings because if they express something right? You see, if they express something uncomfortable, now I'm uncomfortable and I don't want that, right? Um, so I don't know. I hope that
It
kind of
does, and
answers
that
your
yeah,
question.
it
It depends. It's sort of
well, in the open, that's what I discussed, and there's 2 kinda options that we as men take, and that is just to keep letting it load up, so,
yeah,
yeah, they come in, they take over your house,
yeah,
the
yeah.
person asks you to move, you help them move.
hmm
We just keep doing. We just keep doing and keep doing.
Yeah, and resentment grows.
And then we kinda
Yeah,
pull away from everything as externally doing it. So over
yeah,
getting giving and hidden isolation, and, many men will isolate themselves while still showing up. So they say yes when they mean no, they carry other people's emotions and become the "fixer," quote, unquote. Burnout
yeah.
creates
Mm.
isolation faster than distance ever will. So boundaries reveal relationships. They don't break healthy relationships. They expose unhealthy dynamics. So some people can adjust to that, some push back, some disappear. And I feel like those are the real maybe symptoms of lack of dealing with some of the things we've been discussing already. And we'll continue to drill down and drill down and drill down on all these topics. We're going to go broad and then we'll swing back around and drill down a little further. But at the top of this, maybe as we navigate this, and it's so hard, and as you referenced, you went through this, I clearly went through this, understanding what the hell this topic is about and what it means, and what can really happen to us if we don't get a hold of it, and it can consume us. It can because we don't. This is not something that just mom or dad or in-law or whoever come in and take our house. That happens at Thanksgiving. We can say, fuck it, we're going to their house for Thanksgiving, where I can go outside and play with the dogs or whatever, get away from this bullshit. That's not fixing the problem, because the problem's going to show up at work when the person at work who's difficult, as far as you're concerned, is blah blah blah. So this is all how, and I think what you touched on that used to be so foreign to me, not so much anymore, is this understanding of our feelings, the internal portion of this, and why am I so upset about that? And if we can de-escalate that portion, so you know, the truth is, Dad taking over. This son of a bitch has been doing that since I was in. And we're clearly not talking about me and Dad in the home growing up, but this son of a bitch been trying to take over my life. There's some crazy shit's going on in there. It's not really that he said he wanted to cook the steaks. Did I mind? And uh, so
And
now that
just
I,
can
yeah,
I step in here for a second? If you really can take yourself into that kitchen and a person that is working, they're frustrated, right? There's this frustration that's building, and you could call it resentment. And what's standing in that kitchen is a history of a lack of expression. I'm very intimately familiar with the mechanics of resentment. It's a mechanical process for us as humans. And when I say to people, hey, resentment is actually related to your inability to express yourself and the way you consistently consent when you don't want to and you never say anything. You don't express yourself. And that's generally because we, at our core, are good. And so a lot of times people don't want to express themselves because it's actually really intense. And there's something in them that knows it's not gonna come out well. So we just don't express ourselves, right? Which reflects a level of awareness, but we're not generally aware of our role in resentment. We're not aware of where we're responsible because we're not aware of our feelings and what we haven't expressed.
And
Um,
I think that's a key thing here. We're gonna end up in the same place every time, and that's in front of the mirror. And what is my role in this? What can I do to be better so that
how
I
can
don't
I make it
react?
better?
Yeah, so that I don't have a reaction to this. I can respond. No, Dad, you're not cooking the steaks. I bought some really good steaks that I'm excited about cooking. I'd love for you to be my sous chef. I'd love to have you as a
Yeah,
helper. Like
take
I
it
don't have
easy.
there's a
I really
yeah,
want to do it. Like, I
yeah.
really wanna do
Yeah,
this. I'm
I
looking
wanna do this
forward
for
to
the
it,
family.
right?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I got plans. I'll run those by you. If I've missed a step, I'd love to hear some input, but I'd like to do it. And it's not, it I think to the statements you were making where things are building up and the resentment occurs, that's why we have to navigate this conversation about boundaries because it is a it enables us to protect relationships that we care about
Yeah.
and protect ourselves from relationships we care about hurting us. And I think that if we, as men especially, and it's, understanding self, if why am I so upset about this? If you can understand why every time Tom at work is at the water cooler and says some stupid shit, you're ready to claw his face off, beat the shit out of him. Why are you there? Why are you even in that mode? Why aren't you like, Tom's a silly goose? You know what I mean?
Why doesn't it
Get,
roll off your back? Yeah,
yeah, Tom's a
yeah,
silly goose. I'm going to give me some water and head
mhm,
on back to the
yeah,
office.
yeah,
It,
and a lot of times people would walk away from that if we got really agitated, and we might be confused as to why it was so intense for us. I get that a lot, and people are confused by how disproportionate the reaction is,
and it's the
right?
buildup, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's the
everything that led to
decade,
that
it's
moment.
the
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and yes, exactly. It's the decades long lack of awareness of our interiority and what we're experiencing and what we're feeling and how to communicate it. Like, literally how to share what's happening in here. That is just not an automatic thing for us.
And what's interesting in that last part, that I was saying that it does not break healthy relationships.
It can make them
It will definitely make them stronger. It will reveal, however, an unhealthy relationship. And so it could come across as if man, I set this boundary. I told him, we are not going to do that anymore. Whoever, friend, coworker, whatever. And all of a sudden, you don't talk to coworker anymore. Coworker doesn't come around. Friend doesn't come around. Whatever it may be. And you think, oh shit, I set this boundary and it broke the relationship. No, it didn't. It
Yeah.
was broke before that. You just put your foot down and weren't going to tolerate it, the part that was affecting you. And
Amen. There's
and
a can I
that's
let me throw
yeah.
another scenario really quick because you keep touching on some. So here's something that I hear all the time, right? Because this is it's a constant topic. Uh, so a lot of times people will express a frustration because in their mind they've set a boundary and the other person doesn't respect it. It's this right, or they respect it once and then really quickly it's being pushed again, right? Right. So how do you like if you really feel into what's happening there, right? It just reflects what we're talking about. And one of the things that the first thing I say to people is a boundary is not a wall, it's a self-expression. This is about you expressing yourself no matter what people say. So it's not about
The
I don't
reaction you
the
get.
reaction is about you being able to express yourself. So one of the first things I do with people is I kind of remove that word boundary in a way. I'm not, if that makes sense, because, or
Mhm.
we start to dissect it. And then we find ourselves in the field of expressing ourselves. And how that is an ongoing process. You're going to need to do that regularly. Because if you're saying to someone, "Hey, I don't really love that. Can we change this?" It's you can pretty much be sure that the reason they're doing it is because of a lack of awareness and habit. So it's going to happen again. Just be prepared. That's right, because if you've been in the relationship long enough, then you would have contributed to the dance. You would have contributed to right, and so it's going to take some time, and you're going to have to just consistently remind the person of the changes you're working to evoke.
And again, I wanna clarify 2 things that I know you're not saying. You're not saying you want to change that person. The boundary is not about changing another person. A behavior in your presence, an act that is occurring where you are a player, that is what is changing. I wanted to clarify that. And then as you state this, it it really light bulb goes off for me. So we've gotten control of why I'm getting so upset about this thing happening. I understand my portion of this. So I'm able to diffuse the agitation in it. And then in the reminding, it ain't that hard because you're not inflamed and ready to kill the person, not literally,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
figuratively.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and so you're able to step it down and say, remember mom, remember dad, remember Joe, remember Tom. I don't, I don't want to talk about that topic.
Mhm.
I just don't want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it. And,
exactly. Or
and,
like
and
my mom had, for years, I'm probably into my 30s, would consistently ask me about paying my bills. "Did you pay your insurance?" I'm in my 30s, right?
right.
And, there was a period of time where it agitated me, right? Because it was seen as some sort of disrespecting thing or
Sure.
some violation of my boundaries, right? But honestly, what happened in my own healing process is it just stopped bothering me. Honestly, it just stopped bothering me.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing about that is when it stopped bothering me and I stopped being defensive when she would ask about it, which is just based off of her own needs for safety and security as a mother. When it stopped bothering me, she quit asking about it. It's almost like my defensiveness was the very thing that contributed to her asking about it. And if you really get what I'm saying, it makes sense because that defensiveness was me expressing a lack of awareness, right? I'm taking it personal, agitated. It's a lack of awareness. It doesn't take into consideration her experience as a mother, right? And so, on a really deeply unconscious level, you can imagine how that would not make her feel safe. Her son's not aware, really, right?
Hmm.
That's
That's
my
interesting.
experience. It stopped bothering me, and
Yeah.
then she stopped asking.
That's interesting. And, obviously would not occur in every scenario. And I don't think
Sure.
Jason's suggesting that, but
Well,
the
it's a universal
idea,
principle. You could call
yeah,
it attraction rather than promotion.
gotcha. And I understand that, we're gonna get back what we put out, and it's
Yeah.
at an energetic level, and a lot of times we don't have the time to dig down like Jason has in his, obviously with his recovery, him and his mom's back and forth is gonna come up heavy in that, and in every relationship
Lots
we
of
don't have.
opportunity to
Yeah,
to
lots of
to
opportunity to go
share
through
and
that,
heal and
and
yeah.
and so I think that, we don't even have to understand that portion at that level with every interaction other than what I put back is coming back. So if I put out kindness, empathy, understanding, and these type of welcoming emotions, if you will, versus anger, put off, annoyed, etc. That's what I'm going to get back. And if I'm annoyed all the time, if I'm defensive all the time, if I'm angry, then I'm going to be running into that.
Yeah, amen. But, I wanna speak to a general principle, okay? When we've gone through life, uh, living, like, decades unaware of that principle of how it works, like, what we give out comes back on an energetic level,
Hmm.
there's a lot of momentum behind it. So, even if a person runs into this, it now becomes more aware of what we give out comes back. and they start to pay attention to that and change in what's being given out, like consciously working on that. You won't generally see the effects in the environment. Maybe you might not see these huge effects immediately because there's a lot of momentum the other way, and so that's affecting your perception. So at what happens over time as we become aware of that is it changes our perception of things, right? And so it can take a little while for that, but in any given interaction, if I'm communicating from a place of non-agitation, it's less likely I'm provoking agitation or that agitation is being provoked. Not that it's, but it's less likely. And then there's a piece of it that speaks to a larger field of experience, karma, or like a layer of karma. What we give out comes back. It's just a universal principle. And that has implications for our whole life, right? And so at a level, when that when a human is really deeply aware of that principle and they're naturally in a state of non-agitation, what happens is they move through the world and they're running into less agitation because their energy is not evoking it in others. But that takes some time
Yeah,
to
it's what
for that level to, yeah.
it is so wild as it occurs. I've got some years of momentum built up in the being kind. I still stumble. I'm not saying that I'm perfect every time, but I'm kind almost ad nauseum. Like when I start a conversation and don't say, "Hey, how are you doing?" first, I will literally interrupt myself and apologize and say, "I'm sorry. I should have started with, how's your morning going? How's your day going?" or whatever. It's a lot of that started with me out of I don't know if it's devious or not, but when you're kind to somebody, you call somebody on the phone, you're calling AT&T or Verizon, your electric company, whoever, to deal with something. You're not calling them just to tell them how great things are going. You're calling because you got some
You
bullshit
get
you
a
got to
problem.
deal with. And and when you're nice, they're nice to you, and you get what you want.
Generally,
And
yeah.
and then it's like, "Oh, well, hold on. That actually
Mhm.
works just with all humans all the time." And so anytime I'm dealing with another human being, whether I'm checking out at Publix or Kroger or whatever, uh, I run into anybody, I've got to ask them how their day is going, and I sincerely mean it. And I'll tell them, "I know you're at work, so I know it's a little hard to answer that question, but I do mean I do hope that you're doing well. You're gonna go on the rest of the day. There's gonna be other things outside of work. I hope they're going good as well." And then this positive stuff happens, it'll happen randomly. To your point, people are less agitated around me. Um, Now I can get there, somebody cuts you off in traffic, things like this. But man, again, if you can de-escalate yourself from, they're not messing your day up unless you let them. They cut you off, you slow down a little bit. You didn't hit them, you're all good.
Yeah,
You keep
yeah,
rolling,
yeah.
and instead of getting
Let it
all
go.
inflamed and riled up, and anybody in the car is gonna catch that energy, and they're gonna have to deal with it, and, I my kids, like, what they've had to deal with as children is tough, and I hate it, and, I now kinda where I'm at now, I can see, and I know where y'all got that. I know why. Why don't you try a little calmer tone, see if it doesn't work a little better for you? And they look at me like, this motherfucker, really? You want us to try a calm tone? That may
Mhm.
work, huh?
Yeah.
And I get it. And I can't go back. If I could, I would, obviously. But, those are the things that we're talking about, and how important they are. And so, as always, we've got a practical tool. It's going to be the boundary check. So ask yourself, what am I tolerating that feels heavy, agitating, if to our language, and what do I need right now? What is the simplest boundary that protects that need? And then say, I care about this, but I'm not available for this behavior. What I can do is this: no justification, no apology. Strengthening self respect, ignoring limits teaches you not to trust yourself. Honoring them builds self respect, reduces isolation, and teaches others how to engage with you. Boundaries are about alignment, not control. And that goes back to my clarification about what Jason was saying when he said that, I want this to change. This is just about how me and you are going to do this dance. I don't do that kind of dance. I don't
Yeah,
want to dance like that. And so
yeah,
I'm not going to dance like that. But I really love having you as a dance partner. And so I don't want you to take that as I don't love you as a dance partner. I just don't like dancing like that. Because and you can even go to to the step further because it makes me feel and enter how you feel. I feel anxious, I feel sad, I feel like I'm being controlled, I feel whatever. And then the partner doesn't have to just go, "Oh, okay, we'll never do that again." That's probably not gonna happen, to Jason's point. They're gonna come back, and do it again, but you've dealt with your shit. It's not gonna bother you as much. You're gonna say, "Look, I'm not that agitated about this because I know what's going on. I don't even feel the way I used to feel about it." And maybe it is that your dance partner ends up with the same results that Jason and his mom's story that ended up in, and it just kind of fixes itself. If it
yeah.
does,
It's it like what I'm. Remember that the circle reference, right?
hmm
It's really about what is getting outside of the circle and what's not getting outside of the circle. So that's the direction I point people, right? When this because the topic always comes up because it's always about expression. And so, right, we so it's not so when people, draw a circle and then I move us inside the circle. I say, "Okay, what's going on in the circle that's not getting outside of the circle? And why isn't it getting outside of the circle?" Right?
hmm and yeah, just what we got to own. So
Yeah.
it's isolation. In closing, isolation isn't always about being alone. Sometimes it's about being surrounded by people while abandoning yourself. Healthy boundaries allow you to stay present, honest, and grounded in your relationship. Discomfort doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something new. And that's so important. And I think in all of this, we need to remember that. Just because it doesn't feel comfortable doesn't mean that there's some deep down, yeah, sure, say something.
Yeah, well,
Subconscious
let me
wrong.
so the discomfort is a requirement. Neuroplasticity, the rewiring of our neurological pathways and the rewiring of our neurophysiology, which is healing, right? It requires discomfort. It's a requirement for neuroplasticity. You could say that, right? Because the habitual reactions are related to rigid, calcified structures in our brain and our nervous system. They're reacting to the world in old ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
Right? So
totally.
those pathways are frozen. And so for the, pathways to get unfrozen, it requires more energy. And that shows up as discomfort. So
And
it's a requirement.
and which is great to know because all of this is going to be uncomfortable at the beginning.
Mhm.
And just know, to Jason's point, what I just heard him say was it's not normal. We've got to get the road is bumpy. We got to get it worn down. And so it's going to be uncomfortable. There's discomfort. It's going to be involved in this. And we just have to understand that's part of the process. Keep fighting. And, as always, thank you guys so much for giving us your time. It's your most valuable asset. And we understand that. And until next time, stay in the fight. The world is a much better place with you in.